This is one of the new Italeri box illustrations. It's nicely done, but I prefer the old ones with a pic of the build model. The box art appears on the short sides again, vertical on one side, horizontal on the other. Here we have the length of the build model, 12.6 centimeters or almost 5 inches. One of the long sides shows the decal sheet. We have 5 options. Then we have a brief history of the RSO in French, Dutch, Spanish, English, Italian and German. 2 painting options can be found on the other long side. Only Italeri acrylics are mentioned. The colors names are also there, so you can choose them from the range you prefer. The usual safety instructions conclude the walk around the box. Almost. That's something new. Italeri was more generous with plastic bags than usual, and I like that. The cap was packed separately and it's free of scratches. It's a matter of personal taste, but a one-piece cap makes the assembly much easier, and it makes painting the interior much more difficult. You can't have everything. Seam lines are almost non-existent. The pin on the roof needs to be removed properly. The ventilation screens for the engine will look nice after a wash and some dry brushing. Well, I doubt that they'll be visible behind the bed's front end, but who knows? Not many details inside the cap. The whole will be covered with a dome for the no-tech light. The 2 large bumps are the cap's ventilation, and I'm sure that they didn't look like that in the actual cap. Some reference pics will be helpful. These ejector pin marks won't be visible unless you flip the RSO over to look inside. It's up to you if you want to fill and sand them. This box is really packed. Usually you find more nothing than styrene in Italeri boxes. Sprue A comes twice and contains all running gear parts. Four steel wheels for either side. And here you can see the original kit number. Nuts and bolts look quite nice. The rear shows that the spokes edges should be cleaned up. The seam line may be faint seen from the front, but this view tells a different story. I had some fit issues with the road wheels of the RSO 3 and the freewheel tracks I used. The wheels appeared to be a bit too wide, but I'm sure it was my fault. I painted and weathered the wheels before I had the tracks for dry fitting, and at that time I didn't have an airbrush. The paint will have been too thick. The RSO has front and rear drive sprockets. The rear one is part 23, well, the front part of the rear one, that is. The front one of the front one is part 31. Some of the nuts and bolts are damaged, but I guess a lot of them will be covered with dust, mud or snow. Part 28 is what worries me, because it's needed to secure part 23 on the rear axle. That doesn't look any good. All in all, the sprockets are very real looking renditions of the actual parts. The brake drum's cooling ribs look the business. They'll pop out after a wash and some dry brushing. These areas won't be visible, but you want to check for a proper fit. Here we have the main parts for the undercarriage, including the swing arms. I had some fit issues when I built these sub-assemblies. One of 4 half-round locators snapped off while I was dry fitting the parts. I should add that the reverse styrene was very brittle. Maybe that was the reason. There are some sink marks, and you want to check along with the road wheels if filling them is necessary. No question, the seam line is pronounced, but it's got to go anyway. Ejector pin marks and sink holes. Well, it's an old kit made with old techniques. Next sprue. More parts for the undercarriage and a couple of interior parts. A detailed underside. Who would have expected that? No need to worry about the ejector pin marks. The sidewalls of the undercarriage. The exhaust pipes won't be too easy to weather. They were painted with the actual vehicle where they were already in place. The 8 small holes at the front on either side appear to be air intakes for the air-cooled V8 engine. And the top of the undercarriage. It'll be covered completely with cabin bed. That's the lower part of the front end. The hinges could use some extra detailing, or some mud. And the front panel with a slot for the manual starter crank. The upper part of the front end. It looks crude and I'll check my reference pics for what it really looked like. The rear end. The square hole is a locator for the rear axle. The backrests don't look too bad. If I should use driver and passenger inside the cab, I leave them as they are. If not, I build new ones, but mainly because of the canvas texture. These ejector pin marks won't be visible, so there's absolutely no need to do anything about them. The exhaust comes in 2 halves. The pipe needs to be drilled out after it's been cleaned up. All parts for the rear axle. Details aren't too bad for such an old kit. And now for some interior parts like steering levers, brake and clutch pedal and gear shift. They all have very pronounced seam lines, but I like the steering levers. They appear to be authentic enough. I'll check the rest with the reference pics. The next sprue comes with all parts for the bed and the larger parts for the driver's cab. Wood grain bolts and hinges look nice. You really can build this out of the box if you want to. If the underside was visible, the missing wood grain and details were annoying. You should keep that in mind if you place the RSO on a dia in a way that could allow a view of this area. And again, we have some issues that are based on the age of this kit. While the outsides of the bed's walls look like the real deal, there are nasty ejector pin marks on the insides. It isn't impossible to fill, sand and rescribe them and to add wood texture, but you want to be careful. These parts represent the locks of the sidewalls. Sidewalls and tailgate can be opened and lowered, one or all of them. A loading or unloading scene comes to mind. There's a sinkhole on top of the no-tech that should be filled and sanded. The shape looks a bit odd, but this will hardly be visible inside the dome. While the doors come with handles as single parts and look nice from the outside, the interior side looks bad. There's no way you could leave them like that if you want to display them open. The flaps for the cab ventilation and the headlights. It might be a good idea to drill them out, paint them silver and fill them with PVA glue to imitate the glass. I lost the dashboard of my RSO 3 and had to build a new one. There isn't much of a dashboard anyway, and there weren't many gauges and lamps. Here we have floor panel and engine cover. They come as one piece. The screen looks quite realistic. Nonetheless, I'm thinking of replacing it with some fine copper wire screen. It depends on the visibility. The seat's cushions are also integrated. They could use some texture. I need to check how much of these openings and ejector pin marks will actually be visible. I'll let you know as soon as I was able to do some dry fitting. I'm almost sure that the area under the seats isn't covered by the undercarriage. On this section of the sprue we find the supports for the canvas top that isn't part of the kit as we learned at the beginning. Then there are exterior parts like tooth, jack and the bonnet. The supports for the canvas are nicely done. The seam lines are easy to scrape off with the back of the hobby knife. The sprue gates are rather big, but I found them to be easy to clean up on my RSO3. The bonnet has some flaws on the upper area. The molds are old, so things like that can happen. On the other hand, these bits can depict some damage on the bonnet, so I can live with them. The jack comes in only 3 parts. Its main structure doesn't look bad at all. The ejector pin marks are on the rear. The stand is a sad piece. It should be replaced or rebuilt. The handle from the rear. It could use some sanding to give it the proper shape. It looks quite okay from the front. Tool time. This ball shape belongs there. Please don't remove it. Apart from the little flash around its tip, the pickaxe looks nice. The toe pindle has nothing in common with the actual one. Strange to see this because there was a very nice rendition on the RSO3 kit. This sprue is part of the RSO3 kit. Only the ice cleats in the center are to be used for one version of this kit. The clear parts are the windows for the driver's cap. They came packed separately and are absolutely clear without any distortion. They aren't too thick either. Very nice. The tracks are unusable in my opinion. They're rigid and they're the old type that can't be glued with plastic cement. I know that many of you like vinyl tracks and won't agree, and that's okay. I never liked them, and they're one of 2 reasons why I built much more trucks and Jeep-type cars than tanks. Although detail isn't really bad, I chose free tracks for the RSO3. Not the cheapest solution, but I love the result. For this build I ordered Master Club tracks. They're a bit cheaper, but details are even nicer. The cast texture of these track links comes so close to the real texture that it's hardly believable. As I already mentioned, there are 5 marking options. The decals with the number 2 are different, and it would be nice to know which is which. The speedometer must be a joke. I'd love to see an RSO going cross-country towing a pack 40 at 200 kilometers an hour. These are the decals for the version I'll build. As you can see, we have red stems, but black ones wouldn't be wrong either. Both colors were used. The decals are neatly printed and they're in register. There's almost no carrier film. They're thin and I guess they lay down nicely on the model. The instructions start with the same short history of the vehicle we already saw in the box. The sprue map even includes the cab. Nothing unusual here. The build starts with the undercarriage and the running gear. I like these small sub-assemblies. That's a nice help for my bad eyesight. Even though this sub-step includes 10 parts, the steps aren't too busy. The cap's exterior is a busy step and the errors could be confusing. Well, we all know that instructions should be read carefully before the build. The bed is a rather quick build as far as I remember it. Five steps complete the construction. And here we have the painting guide and the marking options. I wish Italeri and a couple of other manufacturers would switch to colored guides. The full color table. As I said, you can use the colors names to choose them from your favorite brand. I won't talk as much as usual. I want you to enjoy the impression of the parts without being distracted too much. There are 3 sprues and here we go. You can tell at a glance that these aren't figures that are up to today's standards. There's a lot of flash and details are soft. And everything is molded on. The hands are badly done and the sprue gates sit in very unfortunate places. There are 2 identical pairs of legs on this sprue. This is something I never saw before in over 40 years of modeling. I'm really sorry, but the faces are horrible. Sprue B contains the officer, and his face looks like a cartoon version of Horst Frank's face. I'm sorry, Horst, wherever you are. The only things I liked up to now are the uniform's folds, but that appears to be the easiest parts of sculpting figures. I must admit that the boots look better than those in Mignot's Feldgendarmerie set. The same goes for the officer's cap. And here's the third pair of legs I talked about. That'll make for very similar poses, and that's somewhat ridiculous. Popeye's cousin. The third gendarme in his greatcoat. He reminds me a bit of a Roman legionnaire. He's the heaviest figure because he's solid. Believe it or not, but the rear looks much better than that of the mini-yacht greatcoats. His goggles. Ouch. Oh yes, you're right. We saw him before. And we saw him before too. What the? Really, what the? I used the standard TOMY accessories sprue for comparing it to the Italeri items. You've got eyes to see, so I'll leave you alone with the pictures. It's hard to believe that many items are so poorly done that they can't be used for anything at all. On the other hand, two of them are rather good and wouldn't pop out too much if you used them along with accessories of other sets. These helmets leave me speechless. The side caps look more like the rolls I usually have for breakfast. The rolls come actually closer to the look of a side cap than the styrene ones. There are two massive wooden crates in this set, but I don't know yet if I would use them. There's no wood texture, and I guess I'd rather build some from veneer. There's also a table and two chairs, and they have wood grain, but please compare the 98K to the wood grain. This is incredible. The radio is rather guesswork than anything else. These chaps and the accessories don't need instructions, but nevertheless, here they are. I guess only the older ones will ever have heard of SG. The car modelers will know SG Ertl. They were better known for 1/72nd figures in Armour. I wasn't able to find out about the year of release, but this set may be older than the RSO itself. This is the kit that'll appear on one Daiwas Tomoya's DKW NZ350. It's a classic kit that can't and shouldn't be compared to new ones with more advanced molding techniques. It wouldn't be fair. You can love and build it or hate and let it. I built the better part of this kit before, and apart from a couple of minor issues, it was a fun build. The cap is what I haven't built yet, but I don't expect any bigger problems. Well, you know me and you'll have guessed that I won't build this kit out of the box. You can do this without a doubt. You should be aware though that the tracks are the weakest part of the kit. If you're willing to use them, you'll have to be careful not to tear off the rear axle or at least parts of it. The tracks won't look really bad, but getting the sag right will be difficult. I'm pretty sure that I'll enjoy the build, even more so with the Master Club's track I'll use. And now for the figures. I can hardly believe what Italeri did here. In my opinion, they missed a great chance to sculpt nice new figures. Instead of that, somebody went down the cellar to look for the oldest crap they had around. These 40-year-old figures kill the idea of this set. This is too classic, even for me. And that leads us to the price of this set. I paid €28.50. Kit and figure set have amortized many million times, and it's not okay to sell this set for more than €20. Back to the kit. If you're asking for a recommendation, giving you one isn't easy. If it was only about the RSO, I'd say buy it. But there are other figures. You'll have to buy them along with the RSO. There are only a few parts that could go into the spare parts box, and that's all. I bought it because I really wanted this particular kit. I would have even bought it if I had known about the figures before, but that's just me. I don't consider myself as a fan of any brand with one exception, and that is Italeri. I really don't enjoy kicking their asses, but in this case it had to be done. I hope I was able to help you make an informed decision. Before you switch off, here's an outlook on what'll be next. I didn't do any modeling since my girlfriend moved north because I have no mojo. I won't have anything to show you soon. I used all pics I had now, but there are a couple of kits on which I want to do inbox reviews. Taking pics can be done faster than modeling and taking pics, so that's what I'll do first. The order of the pics isn't necessarily the order of the releases. Stay tuned and you'll find out. That's it for now.